Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart uh, the declaration in chunks. So I'm going to do it in about 7 different pieces, and I'm going to recite it and pull it up online so you can see it. And then I'm going to talk my way through it so that you can understand what's being said. Now, remember, this is written in 1776. It pulls on ideas. I mean, Jefferson is the main architect, but others are involved as well. So really, once you dig into the actual reading of it and the writing of it, it's fully understandable. And you can see John Locke all over it. So when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they declare the causes which impel them to the separation. This is our opening paragraph. What's being said here? Well, opening is always difficult when in the course of human events. So as time goes on, this is what's happening. And so he's just starting to set a tone when time goes on. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. Okay, what are these political bands? What is the one people? Well, the one people are the colonists. This friction with the mother country, with Great Britain, has risen from a protesting of stamps and tea and sugar and Boston massacres into actual armed conflict, and now an inevitable clash. And so this is the announcement that, okay, we have these political bands, they must be dissolved. They will be dissolved. So it is time to dissolve the bands and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them. The powers of the earth. This gets a little, this first opening paragraph is probably the most difficult to comprehend at points. And I don't know, I think it's kind of the weakest one too. And to assume among the powers of the earth. The powers of the earth could be Spain, France, England, could be all of the governments of the earth. That's possible. The powers of their separate and equal station to which the laws of nature's God entitled them. This will be the first time that God is brought up. And this will be a reoccurring theme in the Declaration of Independence. The idea of a supreme being. So let's talk about that right now. Nature's God, the laws of nature and nature's God. I think this is 4 or 5 times that God will be referred to, but not identified in the Christian God sense. Thomas Jefferson was a deist, okay? Ben Franklin was a deist. Deism is agnosticism, is an agnostic in simple terms, that there is a being, something up there, something somewhere that kicks the process into motion, but does not get involved in day-to-day events. You do not pray to a deist for guidance, because a deist, his job is done, his job or its job, the spiritual job is done. A deist is a higher power that does not get involved in day-to-day events. So when they're talking here about the equal stations, the separate stations, which the laws of nature, I think being John Locke's laws of nature, and nature's God, which could be another terminology to the creator, because we will talk about the creator, we will talk about the supreme judge of the world, we will talk about God in several instances in this document, but never about the Judeo-Christian God. And so this concept of God is all around this document, but it's not identifying as a God that you would go to church and pray to. However, If you do that, it would fulfill that as well. And so it captures both the God and the non-God, the nature's God and the Christian God. If you choose the Buddhist God, the Islamic God. And so this is a theme that wheels around this. So when we say, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another. So it's time for us to admit that our bands with Britain are over and to assume among the powers of the earth the station to which we are entitled, the station, the level of which we are entitled with the rest of the powers of the earth by the laws of nature and nature's God. A decent respect for the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Okay, if you have respect for mankind, which we do, meaning Jefferson and in the lot at the Second Continental Congress, if you have a respect for the opinions of mankind, then it requires that we should declare the causes for the separation. That's it, that we should announce to the world that the divorce is on. If you respect all that are involved in the situation, then all that are involved in the situation have a right to hear why this separation is taking place. That is part one. Okay? Let's move on to number two. This number two, the second part is probably I don't know, I would say it's the heart, it's the soul of the Declaration of Independence. It's what we try to say, I guess we strive to say, that our republic is shaped around this portion. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Wow. Wow. Oh, man, that's powerful stuff. This is powerful. This is universal. Let's start. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, number one, if something is self-evident, it does not need to be stated. So we hold that these truths that I'm about to tell you, that these things, these truths are self-evident. And what are they? All men are created equal. Boom. That's a shot across the bow to a divine right theory of government. The one that says God is, or says that the king is here and the king takes his orders from God and bestows his bestows his glory on the people. No, all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Well, number one, look at the word creator, their Creator, not the Creator. If there's one word in this document that it just screams at you, it is their Creator, T-H-E-I-R Creator, their Creator, your Creator, my Creator, his Creator, her Creator, not the Creator. That we all have, we have the right to worship whatever Creator we want to worship. If I want to worship this coffee cup filled with coffee, it's my Creator, then so be it. It can be my Creator. Creator never tasted so good. Anyhow, okay, so what do we say here? We hold these truths to be self-evident. One, that all men are created equal. I will get to the limitations on this in a second. Two, that they are endowed by their Creator. They are provided by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The word unalienable, you can't take them away, ever. And what are the rights that you can never take away? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But where does that come from? John Locke. Life, liberty, and property. Now, life is obvious. The right to live. The right to live. That's an unalienable right that was given to me by my God, and I have that right to live. And it can't be taken away by anybody. I have the right to liberty, freedom. I have the right to freedom. Who gave it to me? My Creator. And the pursuit of happiness. That's not property. John Locke always talked about property. Not just items, but the property of free will, the property of mind, the property of that you have your thoughts, your beliefs, your being. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Why did Jefferson use pursuit of happiness? Who knows? I've read stuff on that. I don't know. It wasn't a common term at the time. Pursuit of happiness, maybe Jefferson was just putting his, his little mark on it to slide away from Locke. Maybe the word property was too tied to slavery. Jefferson was a slaver. He owned slaves. A lot of the founding fathers owned slaves. Maybe the word property was too tied into slavery, and in a document where all men are created equal, you can't have slavery as an issue, even though it is. Okay, so let's look at these then, before we get into the last part, that to secure these rights. So what doesn't it say? It says that all men are created equal. Okay, well that's not true. I mean, it's not true. All white property-owning men of means are created equal. At least enough to gain rights out of this document. But the idea that all men are created equal was a big deal at the time, because that wasn't the common ground. There were tiers, and if you weren't if you weren't in the top tier, then you didn't have rights. This is calling for some kind of rights for the common men. Not too common, though. Not too common. If you have too common of a man, then you run the risk of having the capital overrun by mindless mobs, kind of like we have currently in our country. And that was not something at all that Jefferson or the founding fathers wished for. They were afraid of that, very, very afraid, which will become evident in the Constitution 11 years later. But when we're talking about all men are created equal, this does not include women. It does not include black men. It does not include Indians. It does not. It is still limited, but it is a step up. It's a big step up from the idea of a divine right theory monarch. It is going to be problematic in the Declaration, though, when that's what you're talking about, with all men are created equal, and they have life, liberty, and happiness, when it isn't true. But let's not take away from it. This is in a theoretical sense, this paragraph, this line is huge. We hold these truths to be self-evident, clear, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed, provided by their Creator with certain rights that can never be taken away. Among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Cool. Wow. Wow, wow. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So what is it saying? It is saying that the only reason for a government is to secure your God-given rights of life, liberty, and happiness. That's it. Everything else is secondary. Everything is secondary. And where does this government get its rights? Ta-da! From the consent of the governed. By the people. By the vote of the people. That's it. There you go. So you have rights. These rights are self-evident. They are given to you by your God. To secure them, governments are created, and governments get their power from the consent of the people. In a nutshell, this is the Declaration of Independence. It's the key. It is the soul of democracy. And I think in a way, it's why this document is the most beautiful piece of discourse in United States history. It's good stuff. Okay, are we good on part 2? A little more creator. Number 3, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is in the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This is about revolution. This paragraph is about revolution. When any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, well, what ends are we talking about? Well, the ends that we're talking about are the protection of life, liberty, and happiness. So when a government destroys life, liberty, and happiness, it is the right of the people to alter it or abolish it, to alter or abolish that government. And I'm sure there were a lot of people that were on the steps of the Capitol in that rush on Wednesday, January 6th, 2021, that believed that they had the right to alter or abolish their government because it was destroying the ends of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The problem is that their information that they were getting from the executive branch, the president, was false information. They were locked into a spiral that had gone through the system, that had been proven by the system that this was not true. That none of the things that were being claimed by the president were true. And so they were obsessed that they were doing the duty of the Constitution, of the Declaration, if they maybe somewhere, but what they were talking about was not factual. And so whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, life, liberty, and happiness, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish that government and to institute a new government. So break down the old government, bring in the new government, get rid of Britain, bring in a United States government, create the United States of America, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So what are we going to do? Then we will tear down the old because it's not protecting life, liberty, and happiness, and we will create the new and build it on foundations that will affect safety and happiness. It's all about life, liberty, and happiness. Our God-given rights. Our Creator-given rights. Not the Creator. My Creator. My Creator. And this gets difficult when you talk about a social contract because we have to give to get. We have to join the majority. We have to be a part of everybody in order to have our rights protected. And it's difficult to measure that, especially in partisan times. And you have disagreements and violence and insurrections. Okay, part 4. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And all experience has shown that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same ends evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Okay, here we go. Prudence. Prudence is an important word here. Prudence indicates a thoughtful decision, a wise decision, a careful decision. So what it's saying is it's prudence dictates that if a government's long established, if it's been around for a while, you don't throw it off for light causes. Not a light and transient cause. A transient cause is a fleeting cause. Have you ever heard of homeless people are called transients? Well, because they don't have a home. They're moving. A transient cause is a light cause. It's a fleeting cause, and you shouldn't change governments for light causes, because what you do, if you are constantly changing governments, if you're constantly changing anything, then you lose consistency. You lose the institutions that have been built up over time, that have provided stability to our democracy, are there because they aren't transient, because they aren't light, because they're firmly entrenched, and they can take on times when earthquakes shake their core. And so governments shouldn't be changed for light causes. No way. And accordingly, all experience is showing that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they're accustomed. What does that mean? Come on, think about it. What does mankind do? Mankind puts up with things. All experience is showing that mankind is more disposed to suffer than to right the cause. That is the core of the problem. So not only does prudence say that you should be really careful, very careful about changing long-held institutions for light causes, but it also says that man, by his very nature, doesn't change things. I mean, a man doesn't step up and address causes which are harming him. And we don't. Come on. How many times do we put up with things that we probably should deal with? We don't do that. We don't step up and rather than to right ourselves by abolishing the forms to which we are accustomed. But, and this is a big but here. This is a huge but. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, abuses, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. That is pretty strong. Let me look up what usurpations is here. I'm going to look it up because I don't know the exact definition of it. So I'm going here and okay. So what is usurpation? It is to seize power wrongly. And so when you look and you say, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations come to the same conclusion, that they are to reduce us, meaning we the people, we the colonists, under despotism, under tyranny, under authoritarian regime of the King of England, well, then it's our right. And not only is it our right, here, it is their duty. It is their duty to throw off the government and to provide new guards for future security. And guess what? The future security has as its goal to protect life, liberty, and happiness. So this is all going to come down at every turn. It comes down to the protection of life, liberty, and happiness bestowed upon you by your creator, not the creator, your creator. See, you can understand this thing. You can get through this thing. Go back and read that paragraph again. And it makes sense. You can take it apart today and you can make sense of it for today too. So let's move on. Part 5. This is going to sum up the theory portion of the Declaration. Then we will move on to the facts that are submitted to the candid world. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity with which constrains them to alter their former system of government. The history of the King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states, not over these colonies, over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Okay, what do we got here? So we're talking about the previous paragraph. We're talking about the previous paragraphs, but we're talking about the abuses that the king has suffered on the colonies. And the colonies have been, quote, patient, the patient colonies. I don't know if they've been so patient. You know, Boston Massacre, the Stamp Act riots, Boston Tea Party. So, there's a little bit of propaganda in here. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies. And such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. So it's saying, okay, we've put up with a lot of shit here, and we've been patient with this, And such now is the necessity that forces us to alter this route, that we are going to change this route. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the same thing, a tyranny, an absolute tyranny, an absolute ruling, unjust ruling, an unjust dictatorship, an unjust tyranny over these states, not colonies, states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Candid, honest and open. An honest and open world is going to listen to the facts that we will now put forward. And then the facts are a list. He did, he said. Are these really facts? No, some are. Let's take a short look at these. We aren't going to look at them all, but this first portion of the Declaration that we have just finished up, okay, there's some more analysis to go. But this first part, this could be any time, any place in the world. In fact, a good portion of it was lifted by Ho Chi Minh with the communist Viet Cong when they created and wrote, when he put together a constitution and submitted it prior to the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War after the French left. So I mean, you could go to Nigeria and write a constitution, and you could use the Declaration of Independence of the United States as a preamble to that constitution, an introduction, because it doesn't deal with systems of government. It doesn't deal with parliamentary or presidential. It doesn't have amendments or electoral colleges or rules. It is a tribute to a social contract, a Lockean social contract. And it is timeless. It is absolutely timeless. But it is a smaller portion of a larger document, which has a lot of specifics to 1776. And so what I'm going to do next is going to go through some of these specifics to 1776. But these now move us back into that time period. So let's take a look at those next. Okay, let's take a look at some of these. I pulled some of them out. You have there's numerous. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. A lot of these are going to be about the king. And you notice it's the king. They're pointing their finger primarily at the king. Now, it's not just the king that has instituted these injustices upon the colonies. There's also the parliament, because England in the time is in the process of moving. They're in a transition. They're in this hybrid world of a king and a parliament with a prime minister. And so almost all of this is directed at the king. Why? Because this is also an assault on the idea of an absolute monarchy. And so if we can make the king the main villain, Thomas Jefferson, by doing so, can not only highlight the grievances of the colonists, but also the grievances of man against an absolute monarchy. John Locke's ideas of a social contract. Here's another. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. He, the king, took control of the judicial system, which was, prior to that, more in the hands of the colonies themselves. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without consent of our legislatures. Yeah, occupation. You bring in troops, you bring them in, and not at the consent of the Massachusetts Assembly. You're basically taking away the rights of the assemblies of the colonies, now states, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, the Third Amendment, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He is at times transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries, German Hessians, to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He's declared war on his own subjects. Now, is some of this true? Yes, some of this is true. Is some of this propaganda? Yes, some of this is propaganda. Is all of this directed at the king? Absolutely directed at the king. But while Jefferson, in the first portion of this document, goes on about the theories of government, these lists, these numbers, this is what the common man can sink his teeth into. These are the things that can circulate around. And you're saying, yeah, this is not a true democracy. This is not a will of the people. And this is why. This is why. These are the reasons why. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Well, once you put these things into print, you have now put forth a basis of treason. Anybody that signs this document now is guilty of treason to the British government. Anybody guilty of treason to the British government can be hung. So this is serious business. There's a follow-up paragraph that goes on to other people, but first I want us to look hard at a stanza that Jefferson put in, but the signers of the Declaration edited out. It's really interesting for what comes later. And there was a call in June that they were going to break and they were going to go back to their respective colonies on it. So they haven't decided yet. They still have to figure this thing out totally, but it's leaning towards it. And so Adams calls for a special conference, a special committee to write up a proposal that they could vote on. And then he forms the committee. Franklin is on the committee and Jefferson's on the committee. And Jefferson, for I'm not sure for how long. I'm not sure. I should know that, shouldn't I? I should find that out. I think I've always thought it was for like a week or so, retires to his apartment in Philadelphia, and he writes this draft of the Declaration. Um, Not all of it stays in, because this isn't the declaration of one man; it's the declaration of a nation, um, to a country about independence. Um, Yet there are specific things that go out. A lot of it's piddly stuff. It's this word over that word. There's a cool little piece of the movie John Adams. John Adams is a great movie. I mean, if it goes deep into this whole, into the writing and the arguments and the philosophy differences of the writing of the Declaration. And it's when Jefferson and Adams and Franklin are looking for the first time at Jefferson's document. They're looking at this thing for the first time and they're reading it, and they're making some edits. It's a movie producer's thoughts on it, and it looks pretty cool. It looks pretty good. And then they come to this paragraph about slavery that Jefferson. This is Jefferson writing to the king, and this is another one of those lists of complaints with the king. Okay. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither, exciting those very people to rise in arms among us and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them, by murdering the people on whom he has also obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. So what is Jefferson talking about here? He's talking about slaves. He is accusing the King of England of waging cruel war against human nature, about going to a land in another hemisphere and incurring miserable death upon the people in the transportation of the slave trade, and then exciting those people to rise up against the colonists as supporters of the British Empire. Well, come on, this is so hypocritical. Jefferson's a slave owner. Washington's a slave owner. These people, a lot of them in the South are slave owners. Number one, to blame the king for a travesty which you benefit from is hypocritical. Also, you can't put this into the Declaration. Virginia, Jefferson's own state, won't sign the Declaration. They're not going to sign this. South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Delaware, Maryland, they're all slave states. They're not going to sign this with this passage in there. So why then? Why? Jefferson was brilliant. He had to know that this stanza wouldn't survive the final cut. So why did he put it in? Can't find a lot of reasoning for it. Jefferson never says. My thought is that these were smart guys. Jefferson was a smart guy. They knew that this document was speaking not only to today, but to posterity, to the world, to future generations. And Jefferson constantly was troubled by his role with slavery. There are records of his conversations with James Madison, about they both see the evils of slavery, but they didn't have I would say, courage, but they didn't have the answer to end it. Why didn't they have the answer to end it? Because it benefited their lives. I mean, Jefferson could not read and write, and Madison could not read and write and do all that he did if the labor had to come either from payment or from the sweat of his own brow. And so they benefited from the institution of slavery tremendously. Come on, you look at the first 5 presidents of the United States. Washington, slaveholder, Virginia. Adams, Massachusetts, abolitionist. Jefferson, slaveholder, Virginia. Madison, slaveholder, Virginia. Monroe, slaveholder, Virginia, each for 2 terms. Adams wasn't, but all of the Virginians were. So you have 5 Virginians, or 4 Virginians, each 8 years. Well, 4 times 8 is 32. 32 of the first 37 years, 36 years in the presidency were by slaveholders. So when Jefferson places this stanza into the Declaration, he is talking, I think he's trying to convince himself, maybe, 1, of it. And 2, I think that he knows and they know that if this revolution goes and works, that this is a new thing. This is a big thing. The world's going to see this thing. And I want the world to know a better Jefferson than a slaveholding Jefferson. I think he put it in for personal reasons, because he had to know it wasn't going to go in. Yeah, that's what I think. Anyhow, it came out. It had to come out, because the slave states certainly wouldn't sign a document that that had this in it. So there we go. Other stuff came out too. Some of it was small edits, some of it was large edits. But at the end of the day, there's one more substantial piece here that comes after the listing that I think we have to look at. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies at war. In peace, friends. Okay, what's going on here? This is like, okay, we lay out this whole philosophy of the social contract. We put it out there. We put it out there for everybody and their mother to see. Then we go after the king. Boom, 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 boom. And then we turn and we say, guys, it ain't just the king. You're guilty here too. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. These are our brothers. These are our brothers, Brits, Britons, British citizens. Come on, you got a little bit of guilt here too. We warned you about your legislature, about your parliament. We warned you about their unwarranted jurisdiction over us. We reminded them of our emigration here. We reminded them that we came from you. We were you. We have appealed to their native justice. We have conjured them by ties of our common kindred. We have talked about how we are all one. We have talked about this. We have reminded them of this, but they too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. What is consanguinity? I will look it up because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's consanguinity, the fact of being descended from the same ancestor. Okay, so let's go back and say that. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and that we are from the same ancestors. They've been deaf. They have forsaken. Why hast thou forsaken us? We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation. And we hold the British people, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies, if at war, but in peace, friends. So we're saying, here's an olive branch. Join us. Put pressure on your government. Tell your government, tell your king Tell your king what he's doing here is unjust, that this is totally unjust. You're guilty, but we're going to welcome you as a nation, as the United States of America. We will welcome you, the people of Great Britain. We will forgive you. They're not going to forgive the king. Not a chance. Not a chance. Okay, let us keep going. How are we doing here? Are you getting this? Are you thinking through this? Are you making sense of this? When it slows down, it works pretty good, doesn't it? So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 6 is the list of things. Number 7 was the invisible paragraph from Jefferson about slavery. Number 8 was the British Brethren. And then we have our final. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, look at that, the United States of America. That's the first time. We are no longer colonies. We are United States of America. That is the announcement to the world that we are a free nation, the July 4th, 1776, Independence Day, the United States of America. In General Congress, that's the Second Continental Congress in Philly, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world. Well, come on, what is Supreme Judge of the world? What is that? Come on, what is it? It's God, but it's not saying God again. Come on, how many times here in this document do we mention God, but we don't mention the Christian God? Nature's God. The gods of nature and nature's God, entitle them. Their creator, their creator. Remember how key that was? Their creator. So where is religion in this document? It's there. It's there. God is there because God provides you your rights, not the government, your creator. But it isn't the God, it's not the God. I have the right. You have the right to worship whatever God you please. It's at the basis of what our country is. So is God in this document? Yes. Is a particular God in this document? No. No. Do you have the right not to worship a God? Yes. Do you have the right to worship a God? Yes. And so when we say we appeal to the Supreme Judge of the world, it's vague. For the rectitude of our intentions, we do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent state, they have the full power, 1, to levy war, to conclude peace, to contract alliances, to establish commerce, and to do all the other rights and things which independent states may of right do, and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. God again, but not the God. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Wow. Wow, what a document. What a piece of political discourse. Oh, man. You look at the Constitution, and it's boring. It's just a list of rules. It's a rule book. It's Oak Ridge High School rule book. That's it. It's a list of rules. This is a song of the rights of man. It's beautiful.